Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature video number 124, The Biography of Satan. Now, title is not misleading, but we have to get a little bit deeper into what the content actually is, why it's important to the occult, and trust me, it is. In fact, it comes more highly recommended than almost any other work I've ever read and edited through. Now, of course, link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon, a second link to my books blog. I believe my edition of this work is the least expensive, and also not a facsimile. As always, important if you want something that's actually legible. It's 112 pages long once some of the nonsense was removed from it, and it's an extremely good work. It's well written, it has plenty of primary and secondary sources therein, but it is primarily an opinion piece. Now, Kersey Graves, the author, was a spiritualist in the mid-19th century, mid-1800s, of course. An interesting individual, and his opinion, stated in this work, is essentially this, and it's based upon historical accounts, that there is no such thing within legitimate doctrinal Christianity as eternal punishment. In fact, there's no such thing as a hell. There's barely even real mention of a purgatorial system. There is no actual Satan in the pre-Christian tradition that the Christian tradition grew out of. That is, Judaism doesn't really have a devil in the Christian sense. It's simply the Lord, according to the Bible itself, of course, the Christian God, is the actual architect of evil. It's even alluded to several times within the Old Testament. What he points out is that the concept of damnation and brimstone and demons and all these things, and it is a work of demonology. It touches upon various spiritual entities, including pagan figures like Baal and Belial and so forth. His essential notion is that ancient pagans, and this is actually true, it's vaguely alluded to within Republic by Plato, actually, if you've read that, that the pagans that were more enlightened, the intelligentsia of antiquity, realized that it was necessary to control the masses. What better way to do that than to develop the idea that you would be punished for wrongdoing? And of course, this was always co-opted by the state/clergy of the time, which tended to be more or less inseparable. You look at Egypt, of course, you've got the priestly class directly holding court with the pharaoh. There's no absolute power on either side. In fact, it looks like we now consider it possible that they occasionally attacked one another. That is, if one stepped over the proper boundaries of this balance of power, the other would have them killed. Of course, it looks like King Tut may have met his own end at the hands of the clerical class that were tired of his nonsense at the time, and likewise certain pharaohs attempted to consolidate power singularly under their grasp as well. And so this happened throughout antiquity. Essentially, the state or the intelligentsia or some other group of people would make up various rules, and they would enforce them by fear. Essentially, you would be punished for a certain amount of time, or maybe for eternity, for doing wrong. And what Kersey Graves alludes to is this is basically the same as modern Christendom, then modern. You have less of the fire and brimstone actually now than you had at that point in time. And the idea was that weak-minded people were attracted to the doctrine because, you know, they were just easily controlled. And so they would very rarely disobey. Or if they disobeyed, they'd make excuses. A little bit of disobedience, of course, is generally overlooked by any clerical class that exists. But that those doctrines of eternal fire and punishment and indeed Satan himself are not even biblical. There is no actual such being. At several points, of course, you'll note that the Bible alludes to the sort of fallen angel, but the wrongful mistranslation of Phosphoros into Lucifer in the New Testament actually declares that several of those mentions don't even have anything to do with this Satan, even of the Christian path. And why is this important to occultists? If you intend to play around with demonology, if you intend to do summoning, or you intend to delve more into the philosophical side, or even to understand some of the symbolism within alchemy, you need to understand the actual doctrinal biblical basis of concepts like hell or Satan. It's important to note that some of these demonic names that are spoken of in latter days, then latter days as opposed to the birth of Christianity, we're talking the Renaissance, late medieval era occasionally. Some of them are taken explicitly from pagan lore. And only when one understands this can they properly understand the occult. I additionally recommend it to anyone who wants to purge themselves of a fear of hell or divine retribution, if you're from the Christian path anyway. And of course Islam is largely based on Judeo-Christian principles anyway, as well as additional layers of paganism from Arabia. So if you're looking to escape that sort of fear, and you want to steel yourself in the understanding that there is no eternal punishment, there is no actual hell, there is no actual physical Satan, that indeed, if the Christian God exists at all, he's also the arbiter of all evil, according to the Bible itself. I strongly recommend this work, because it'll spell it out for you in no uncertain terms. Yes, indeed, if you look back at the origins of these religious movements, there is no hellfire. There's in some cases we're talking about no afterlife at all. And when you do get that, the only punishment you get in the early tradition is purgatory. Essentially like Dante's Inferno. If you imagine that all of the various sinners went to purgatory, and that there were no other levels of hell, and there was no Satan underneath them sort of trapped in ice, would be an adequate recollection, essentially, of really what was going on within the spiritual world of early Christendom. That is, they hadn't developed the concept of retribution that carried on to the eternal yet. It was all just temporal. It was temporary specifically because they believed, hey, this being is a creator, is all-loving, kind of incompatible with the concept of constantly punishing people for limitless amounts of time based on finite things. So again, link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon, and a second link to my books blog. Very enjoyable work, very well written work, very, very useful for occultists, also useful for people trying to transition out of the sort of false guilt, false fear stuff that comes along with Abrahamism. Of course, the big three-headed dragon of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam has convinced billions of people to waste their lives throughout time. Only then, once you understand that those gorgons and boogeymen from within these religions aren't even part of their original doctrines, or part of the primordial doctrine, and that they take it from Persia and Babylon and Egypt and places like that, only when you understand that can you understand why you shouldn't be afraid, why you shouldn't feel guilty for everything under the sun because some priest or some rabbi or imam told you so. That's about all. Peace out.